Awesome. Thank you so much for joining us for From Idea to Hired. We have a great panel here for you today to talk about everything from book and film and agenting and all kinds of good stuff. My name is Nathan Bransford. I'm a former literary agent turned author. I'm the author of the Jacob Wonderbar series and How to Write a Novel. And I blog about the writing and publishing process at nathanbransford.com/blog. We have some great panelists here. Let's go do introductions in alphabetical order. So that starts with Bridget.
Hi, I'm an agent at JABberwocky Literary Agency, which represents such notable clients as Brandon Sanderson, Charlene Harris, and Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I've been here for about 2 years. I was at Dunham Literary before that. I represent fiction for age 10 and up, so middle grade and YA, all genres from rom-com to hard science fiction, and in adult SFF, historical fiction, some literary fiction, a variety of things there.
Awesome. Kirsten?
So I am an agent at Root Literary, which is based in LA, but I'm based over in New York as part of what we call Root Lit East. I've been here since the start of 2020, which has been both, half a second and a century. I was at PS Literary beforehand. I also specialize in genre fiction, pretty much middle grade and up. Mainly sci-fi fantasy, though it can be stuff with a bit of the fantastic or just like totally space opera, secondary world. And I also work with graphic novelists, generally illustrators or author illustrators, and those can be contemporary and speculative. I have a bit more range there just because the pictures make it more interesting. So I've been working with graphic novelists for the past couple of years.
All right, Lars.
All right, hey, I'm Lars Theriot. I was an agent at ICM, a company called ICM, for 20 years, representing screenwriters and directors. I'm now a manager, which is a slightly different job, but I still represent writers and directors at a company called Industry Entertainment. And I think part of the reason why I'm on this panel and have been for a few years now is I have a side business in comic books. I represent a bunch of comic book creators and some comic book libraries, and I sell a bunch of those into movies and television as well.
Awesome. And Quressa.
Hi, I'm Quressa Robinson. I've been at Nelson Literary Agency since 2017. And before that, I was an editor at St. Martin's Press. I represent middle grade and up as well, mainly genre, but I do a little bit of rom-com, literary, some romance in the adult space, but primarily in the adult space, I do science fiction and fantasy.
Awesome. So, there are a lot of avenues available to authors these days in terms of how to publish their book, everything from self-publishing to hybrid publishing to traditional publishing. What would you say to an author who's wondering if they still need an agent? Do you still need an agent if you have a book? And if so, what are some of the reasons why you might need one? And feel free to jump in.
Well, if you want to sell to a traditional publisher, most of them don't take submissions that aren't agented. So yes, you absolutely need an agent for that. Also, you absolutely want an agent to look over contracts. We have just like a wealth of knowledge and a broad knowledge about contracts from publisher to publisher, and we know what's acceptable and what's not. We're much more able to see what's going to screw you over down the line, even if you don't know that.
Yeah, especially with publishers getting more and more into graphic novels and the comics business really opening up. Of course, companies will love to take all the sub-rights off your hands, like they'd be happy to, but that's a decision you really want to make carefully, and an agent can help advise you if a company has a track record of placing, foreign rights. Generally, you don't want to give away a movie either way, but they can help you with that decision and really advocate for you, like Bridget said, long-term versus just right away. And
handle the sub-rights for you. We have 2 people in our agency whose whole job is handling foreign rights and audio rights and things like that. So that's something where even if you were able to keep it yourself, you wouldn't have the co-agents all over the world who could sell those rights into Germany or Poland or whoever knows what countries might be interested.
Yeah, and an agent is your business partner. So they're able to explain things that you might not understand about the publishing process. And you can ask them questions all along the way, questions that you might not be comfortable with asking your peers or your editor. So we kind of explain and give detail to all the different points of publishing.
And Lars, on the film side, how do you think through like when to be thinking about getting a manager or an agent, and what's the value that you see there?
Yeah, it's, the movie business is a very particular animal, and it's got its own language, and it's constantly changing, and I think it can be a little bit dangerous for authors because almost no author gets into the business of writing thinking, oh, my book, I want my book to be made into a movie. I mean, it's probably a fantasy that all authors have, but that's not why you do it. So I guess it can sort of be this thing that comes along, and if you're not prepared for it, it can gobble you up. So I think having an agent to sort of ease you into, hey, this is how it works. You're going to hear a lot of phraseology, a lot of terminology that sounds weird and doesn't make sense, and here's what it means. I think it can just make you feel a little bit more comfortable and frankly protect you, from a business that can be a little bit predatory at times.
Yeah, it's incredibly valuable to have someone who can be there to be like, okay, yes, this is normal. I've seen this multiple times. This is not just you.
Yeah, like why does that contract say that they own the rights to everything throughout the universe? That's a weird phraseology, but they do.
I wanted to hold on to Mars rights, but
yeah, not anymore. But Lars, I think you brought up a good point too, which is a lot of times these things, the foreign interest or the movie TV interest can really feel like out of the blue, exciting, this like dream come true, but something they didn't really think about realistically before. Mm-hmm. And so I think the agent or the manager can also be a really great partner in thinking about, well, what do you want creatively long-term from your career? Like what kind of product do you want to see from your work? What kind of work do you want to be known for? What kind of artist do you want to be known as? And that can be easy to forget in the really exciting flush of, oh my God, we're gonna, your stuff is gonna become a movie. We want to throw money at you. It's important to remember that this is your art, this is your product, like your name is on it to a certain extent with movies. And we can help you through not just the business decisions, but also what kind of creative do you want to be?
Yeah, what kind of leverage do you have to protect the integrity of your vision? The answer, by the way, might be not much, but sometimes it's, yeah, you've got plenty of leverage. You've got 10 studios all vying for your book, and you can dictate your terms and how you want to protect, what goes on the screen.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of authors probably know that things that agents do are, sending books to editors and negotiating contracts and kind of managing an author's career. What are some of those other under the radar things that agents do that are kind of maybe authors might not know about before they have one, or some of the things that you do to kind of keep things on track?
I mean, I think that's a great question because I do often hear from authors, not mine, of course, but authors who maybe have interest already, or they've had people knock around the door before going, okay, well, if I have people who are coming to me, do I really need an agent at that point? Do I need a manager? Do I need someone if I've got the deal in hand? What do you do past just getting that first offer? And I think, like we touched on, the long term is really important. What happens after your first project is really, really important. So how are you going to leverage that first project into future projects? Will you know if your publisher is doing the publicity they're supposed to be doing for you on the schedule they're supposed to be doing it, if you haven't seen it happen before? And that's the type of thing we can advise on to make sure that the book and the future books, ideally, are all successes and not just, did you get one paycheck once?
Yeah, and I do a lot of brainstorming with my clients about their projects. So I can walk them through ideas and tell them which ideas that I think are most marketable. I review their manuscripts, I edit their manuscripts, things like that.
I also think it cannot be overstated how important it is to have someone who can talk you down when you start freaking out about everything that can potentially go wrong in this industry. To have someone who is deeply invested in your work, but also not quite so much as you are, who can take a step back and be like, okay, so either this is bad, but in the long term we can figure it out, or this is not actually a problem. This is like a normal phase in the life cycle of a book. And it's frustrating right now, but it'll be okay.
So when authors are approaching you and they have a submission, whether that's a query letter, which for those who don't know is a letter describing your project, is just often the first interaction you have with a potential literary agent, or when you're hearing a pitch, what's going through your head and what are some of the things that you're looking for as you're evaluating a project to consider whether you want to read more and what like attracts your attention?
Well, I always think of a query letter as being very similar to, I process a query letter the same way I do books in a bookstore. I look at it and say, is this something that appeals to me? Am I interested in this? Just like from reading the back cover, from reading the first couple of pages, do I want to take this book home? Do I want to pay $20, $25 for it and spend my time reading it? And then there's also the additional question of, do I have the contacts for this book? Do I know who to sell it to? Do I know how to position it in the market? Can I set this book and this author up for success?
Yeah, and I think it depends on where you are in your career as an agent. Because I do a lot of science fiction and fantasy, I get a lot more particular about what I want to take on next as my client list grows. So I'm looking for things that like supremely wow me, that I don't have, that my clients can't produce, something very unique and special. But I'm also looking at whether or not the author has a good grasp of their story, that they understand it and know how to explain it to someone other than themselves. And then above all else is the writing. Like, I'm very into voice-driven writing. So if it has that kind of lyrical voice that I'm always looking for, then that's already going to hook me.
Those are both really good answers, which is, frustrating for me because I feel like I always give a really annoying answer, which is I don't really know, but I know it when I see it, because I feel like when I get to ask this question when we're doing this panel in person, I always kind of feel like the question is, how do I make my query or how do I make my pitch better so that you, Lars, will respond to it? And the answer is I don't really know. I can't just tell you, well, if you do these 10 things, then I will want to read it. Because I think what you guys are saying is that there's a big element of feel to it. Like, this feels really cool, and I see the vision for it. You kind of get a little buzz at the back of your head. Like, I know where this could go, and I know what it could be like. And that's a very difficult thing to explain, or like how to do. But your guys' answers are really, really smart and really good. I mean, be passionate about your story and tell me why you love it, and then there's a better chance that I will.
That's such a good point though, Lars, because I think people do get caught up in thinking, well, what is a good query letter, right? What does it do? And if you think, well, a good query letter gets, 10 out of 10 agents to request it, that's not necessarily the case. Like, the best thing you want is to get, the 5 that actually are really interested in the type of project that you're doing to be really excited about it. And the other 5 to be like, oh, okay, I can see that this is X kind of project and it's not for me. You really want to be grabbing the people who do your kind of work, not just lowest common denominator. Anyone could be, maybe this has something to it. That's not the feeling you really want. And on that end, I usually find what divides the good from the great in a query letter, which might mean I personally pass on it, but it's still a great query letter, is the specifics, like Quressa mentioned. Like, if you can get specific about what makes your story special, so it doesn't just feel like 800 other stories that are similar to it. That's the dividing.
I definitely see a lot of writers getting down on themselves because their query letter is not generating enough manuscript submissions or whatever. But you got to remember, batting 400 gets you into the Hall of Fame in baseball. So it's like, you don't have to hit 9 out of 10. 3 or 4 yeses out of 10 is, you're doing pretty well.
It's a really good point. It's almost like a magnet. It's going to attract the right people and repel the wrong people. Those are really good points. How likely are you to take on something that's rough, like a diamond in the rough, an idea that maybe needs fleshing out, versus how much do you want to start with something that's totally perfect?
I think it depends.
Or polished, maybe.
Yeah, I think it depends on like,
the answer to every question.
Yeah,
I
asking
mean,
the tough ones.
for me, those are kind of like what I consider passion projects, and I usually can maybe only take on 1 or 2 of those a year. So it depends on like whether or not I really, really see the potential there, that I have a strong vision, that I know exactly what to do with the manuscript to make it better, and that the author also shares that vision with me and is willing to do the work.
Yeah, the more I love something, the more work I'm willing to do on it. And so that means that like something that I feel absolutely madly in love with, this is going to be one of my top 10 favorite books of all time. Once it's done, we can do a lot of work on. But yeah, I love a lot of things that need less work. And so the more in shape something is, the more likely I am to take it on.
There's also work I can help with, and then there's work that I can't. You know, for instance, with the graphic novelists, I am biased towards people with beautiful art because I can't teach you how to use panels in like an engaging, creative, dynamic way. Other people can, but I can't. But I can teach you how to make a story a book shape, which is a really key thing if you're moving from webcomics to potentially graphic novels with a trade publisher. You know, I can teach you how to get the character beats in the right place and get arcs and, you know, fleshed out worlds. But, you know, with writing, I can't teach you how to write on the line level. And I don't want to, even if I could, because that's a lot of time and effort.
So much work.
So much work. But again, I could teach you how to make a book, which is a slightly different thing.
Like I have one client where the first half of her book was amazing. The final scene was amazing. The like third before the final scene sort of was all over the place, but the voice was incredible. The characterization was wonderful. I just fell immediately into this world. And I was like, I don't need to teach you how to write, how to create a character, how to set a scene. I just need to help you figure out the end of this arc. I can do that. That's manageable. And she absolutely nailed it.
Yeah, and I found like sometimes it's a matter of a writer being a talented writer, but maybe writing the wrong thing, maybe even in the wrong genre, because maybe they have this preconceived notion that if I want to write fantasy, it has to be super dark and serious, but they have this humorous, very kind of light voice and viewpoint, and maybe that switch is all they need to like figure out what kind of story they really need to write and to make theirs better.
That's so key. I've definitely signed one recently that came with those preconceived notions of what X kind of book should be. And I was like, oh, well, you thought, a fantasy book had to have XYZ, but you're not very good at writing XYZ. But you're very good at writing these other things that you did in the rest of the book. So like, let's just focus on what you're good at instead of focus on, what your preconceived notions of the genre are.
Make it your great book instead of generic good.
It also touches on an interesting subject, which is, sometimes there are books that feel like you can just slot them in. They're like, you can see the market, it makes sense. Then there's some that are a little bit more idiosyncratic and maybe more unique and kind of maybe span genres. How much do you think about like, do I need to see the specific place this is going to sit on the bookshelf versus like, I just love this project and I'm taking it on because it's amazing?
That also depends.
I'll go back to the the previous question about what do agents and managers do. We know the market. As a writer who maybe doesn't have any contact day to day with the business, you don't. So you're writing what you want to write, but sometimes that the fire you're putting out can be in the wrong direction. So we can redirect it. Like, hey, the market's looking for this, or it's looking for that, or it's not looking for that. But at the same time, I almost always tell my writers, you shouldn't be chasing the market because the market is going to change. You should be writing what's fighting to get out of your head, because that's the thing that's going to be successful. And to your point, Nathan, there are those things that are so weird and so strange that I don't know exactly where it's going to go. I just know that I love this thing and I can't stop thinking about it, and I'm going to figure it out. For me, Happy, Grant Morrison's book Happy was sort of like that. I mean, that is if I pitched it to you, you would be like, what the hell is that? I don't even understand what that is. And frankly, I didn't either. But I loved it, and I went out and we packaged it and we got it sold as a TV series, and it was on for 2 seasons. So those are the kinds of things that sometimes can be really special because they're so weird, and they're just not like anything else.
Yeah, I feel like if someone just out of the blue described Gideon the Ninth to me, I'd be like, I have no idea what the comp titles for that are, but everyone loved it. It's really, really good, really weird in a way that's very appealing to people. And so it became sort of a comp title for a lot of things. And so there's definitely like, whether or not I'm looking more for things that I think are easily positionable or things that are real passion projects depends a lot on what else is going on with the rest of my list, and what I feel like I have the space and energy to take on. But yeah, there's always room for stuff that I just love.
Either way, I don't think authors should get caught up about it though, because the market that they're seeing is about at least 2 years behind the market that we're seeing. So if they're trying to make this a project that I am going to find easy to market, they're not aiming towards the same target that I may be looking at. So to a certain extent, they shouldn't worry about it too much.
So speaking of that market, so we've had a year. There's a lot that's happened in the last year. What's it been like in the industry, and what shifts have you seen in the past year? With everything that's been going on.
It has been a year, huh?
Yeah.
Very weird.
Quite a year.
It's I don't know about for you guys, but I have seen basically rushes and lulls where like there's huge periods of time where no one's like reading anything, and then there comes a month or two when they're like, oh god, I don't have anything for the season that we're finalizing now, got to buy a bunch of stuff, and then goes back to, oh god, I'm really burned out from all of that buying I just did, and I have to edit these things, and then so they just don't read submissions for a couple of months. But it's people, because we work so far ahead, people are still like, if they want to publish things in 2023, they need to buy things now. So it's still, people are still sort of looking far enough ahead that it didn't really stop in publishing.
And one of my experiences of asking that question over the last like 6 months or so is that if you ask 10 people like what's going on in the industry and how are things going, you get 10 often very different answers. And how are you maintaining a sense of like the pulse and like who wants what right now? How are you thinking it through? Are you still just kind of like taking on things because you love them and sending them out, or is it has the past year affected the way that you think about the market and the industry?
I do find that because everyone's really burnt out and because publishing didn't stop, and Lars might have a different perspective because, production did stop for a while on, film, TV, things like that. But publishing, we just kept publishing the same number of books that we always did. We haven't even dropped list sizes, and that's exhausting on top of everything. And so I found for myself, but also for the editors I work with, people do not have time for things, to even crack open things that they don't love. They don't have the energy to give a maybe, sort of, let's see what happens. They've got to love it from the jump to even get them to download the file onto their computer. That's enough of an ask at this point, that you have to pass this huge hurdle. And then they have to just like really love it to want to add it to their workload. And I feel similarly. I'm really prioritizing things that feel like they're the biggest yeses to me right now, and I can't afford anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's like halfway through the year and I've only offered on 2 potential projects for clients. And usually by this time I've been like at 5 or 7. So yeah, it's a little bit slowed down. You're burnt out. You're doing a lot of reading. You're trapped in your house. So you want something that's going to make you forget about all that. And it's kind of hard to find that right now.
I very specifically remember the answer I gave last year because it turned out to be right. Let me pat myself on the back. Everyone was buying this time last year in the movie business, and I think I described the business as a train yard where if you don't move some trains out, it's sooner or later you're going to not be able to move more trains in, and that's kind of where we are right now. It's very difficult to sell things into movies and television. I've seen some really big packages with some really big talent attached go out and not sell. I think what that does for the book for authors is puts them in kind of a highly leveraged position where, you almost have to have something, sometimes two or three things attached to a movie pitch to make it sell. And a book is one of those things where, it's easy for executives to say to their bosses, it's got this book attached, it sold all these copies and people really love it. And it just makes it easier to sell. And look, the power of the movie stars faded a little bit over the last decades. And so the book is just becoming bigger and bigger piece of the pie in terms of how you sell movies and television.
Have you seen publishers become and producers becoming more cautious, or are people still taking risks? What's your sense of that?
Well, look, they're over. An agent said to me the other day when something we took out didn't sell, he said, I think people are just overthinking it, because there's a little bit of that, right? We spend a lot of money, we have a lot of projects, we don't know how things are gonna, when or how or if they're gonna open up and how fast and all that stuff. I think it's a bigger problem in television. The movie business seems to be opening up faster and more efficiently because there's this. This is my theory, but I feel like there's a sense that everyone thinks, oh, something's about to change. We're all about to start going back to the theater. So there's this thing that we're all working towards in the movie business. On the TV side, though, it's like, it's the same box that I've been trapped with for 18 months. So, I don't know if things are really going to change. But the movie business has this excitement around it. Like, we're all going back to the movies. And that's helping with the movie business, I think. And it's causing the TV business to struggle a little bit.
I don't know what you're talking about. That box is my dearest friend.
Right. I love it and I hate it. Yeah.
And are we going back to the bookstores? I mean, what about the book world?
What's crazy is people didn't really stop. If bookstores were, they bought more books. If people were able to, now not all genres did equally well. Some categories did not translate.
Serious nonfiction. People did not want to read about things that were wrong in the world.
They did not want to read their 900-page political biographies. But if bookstores were able to make the jump to online and open up online storefronts and do, pick up and all that stuff throughout the pandemic, they were able to do, maybe not as well, but pretty well, better than we thought.
One thing that was really rough this year, though, was discovery. So people were buying books from best-selling authors, buying backlist classics, things they already knew about, because, you go on to Amazon and the browsing experience is kind of a nightmare. There's just so many things to choose from. There's no real curation happening there. And so you look for things that you already know you're interested in. And so it was a really rough year to be a debut author, unless you are one of the really big successful debut authors. I think it's going to be really rough for a lot of the people who had their first books come out this year. To see what happens next is I'm hoping that publishers and bookstores will be like, well, yes, that was the weird year. It doesn't mean anything about the future of your, this doesn't actually apply to your track record. It's fine. So yeah, it was book sales were up, but it was very highly concentrated in a certain few categories.
And has the last year changed how you approach your work? I mean, I know that we've all done a lot of reflecting in the last year. Have you changed your processes? Do you look at different things in a different way at all, or are you still kind of staying true to your vision that you've had throughout your career?
I don't know if it's a different approach, but it has been maybe a bit notable in that I've been applying it across the board. But I've really been telling authors to take their time, because I because we discussed how high the bar is right now for me, first of all, I only want to read stuff that I'm really excited about. And for the editors, for the publishers, how high the bar is. And I don't think a lot of people have been producing their best work in the pandemic, which I hope is not mean to say. Certainly I haven't been in top form. And so I think if people can afford to take 6 months and simmer and make their idea the best they can make it, or even just spend time with their family, you know, take walks, anything to take care of themselves right now, I've been highly recommending it. And, you know, there may have been other years where I was like, no, we got to be quick off the jump. We need to get to market now. And this is a year where I've been saying, you know, really just absorb as much as you can and take your time, because we want to be presenting only the best work. And if that's next year, that's next year.
What other advice would you give authors who are like looking at this landscape, you know, trying to think about, you know, how they can break in this sort of uncertain environment? So for people who just have like a really great idea, what advice would you give them about how to approach going forward?
I think that I would also say make sure that the thing you're working on is something you really love, just because it takes up so much energy right now, and because the market is sort of weird and difficult. You don't want to spend months and months working on something that doesn't sell if you don't actually love it. You can think that you're calculating the thing that is most likely to hit the market right, and then the market changes because suddenly it's a pandemic and no one wants to read grimdark anymore. And then like this thing that you've written because you think it's going to sell doesn't. And if you're instead working on the thing that you really love, if the market changes and it doesn't work for you, like it's still not, or the thing that you've been working on doesn't fit it anymore, at least you've spent all of that time on something that is fulfilling to you. And it also means that sometimes you have to set things aside and see what happens in a couple of years. Just because it's not the right fit for the market right now doesn't mean it never is.
You know, one of my favorite little sayings, I say this to my clients all the time, is good is always better than fast. You know, because they can get in their head like it's got to go out next week, and it's like it's not ready to go out. So, you know, we'll take it out when it's ready. It's not ready yet.
So we're just about close to time. I thought I'd finish this. Lars, you made that prediction last year that ended up coming true. Any thoughts or predictions about the next year or 2 or 3 ahead, about where these industries are headed?
Well, I feel good about the movie business because there's a lot of movies that need to get made and that are going to get made. And you know, there was an issue. A lot of movies got made during the pandemic, believe it or not, but they came with a tremendous cost in terms of, you know, what had to be done on set to protect people from COVID, and the amount of money, you know, $8-10 million on a $30 million budget for COVID stuff, which is crazy because that's not something that goes on the screen. So it just wasn't a sustainable, you know, business model. But I think as we start to open up, I mean, I've got a bunch of clients that are about to go into production, and I'm excited about the movie business. You know, TV continues to, there's 600 shows on television now. I mean, 40 years ago, there were 30 or 40. So there's a lot of opportunity, and it's all good. I think we just needed to get this thing behind us so that we could get back to business as normal. So I feel really good about the next year.
What about the book world?
Well, at least in adult SFF, I've been seeing a trend towards the weird for a bit in the past few years, which has been exciting because I love weird, surprising. I think people have just really been breaking the mold. And I think that's going to continue even more so because people, while the backlist is always there, and I think there's going to be, on one hand, a real cozy element. I think there's going to be cozy and there's going to be super like strange, completely unexpected. So I think hopefully at least that's going to continue because I've been liking it so far.
Yeah, I've noticed that last year a lot of rom-coms were bought, a lot of romance. And I think this year people are getting back to wanting a little bit of the darker stuff. I've had a lot of people asking for horror. So I think that moving forward will be on everybody's list as well. But I think it still feels business as usual to me. It doesn't feel like it's changed significantly. Yeah, so I think it's just gonna move forward as it always has.
Horror works well in movie business too, always has, probably always will. So that's a good synergy here. You buy the horror books and I'll sell them for you.
Yeah, horror is very interesting because, you know, for like a decade, you couldn't sell it to the big five, big six at the time. And just like no one was doing it. And then over the last couple of years, it's really started to boom. And Tor now has a whole horror imprint and everyone's asking for horror. And so, yeah, it is kind of like weird horror and rom-coms. I'm interested to see whether the rom-com boom translates at all into SFF. I think we're seeing a couple things there, and I'm just sort of interested to see, like, is that also a thing that's going to be happening?
Interesting. Well, on that note, thank you guys so much for participating in the panel. Thank you to everybody who was watching, and hope you enjoyed it. And best of luck to everybody in this new year ahead.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.